Welcome to another episode of the Voices of the Learning Network. Hey, this is Bill Banham, your guest host today. And in this episode, I'm sitting down with one of the most original thinkers in modern HR and org design, none other than Mr. Perry Timms. Perry has spent decades challenging traditional models of work, leadership, and learning, from his concept of the polymorphic organization built to continuously adapt and reshape itself, to his thinking on learning mosaics. Perry is pushing us to rethink not just how we deliver learning, but how learning actually lives inside of organizations. So for L&D professionals, this conversation goes beyond programs and platforms. It's about shifting from learning as a function to learning as a system, embedded, emergent, and deeply, we hope, human. Perry, how are you? Thanks for joining me today.
I'm great, especially after that intro. Thank you, Bill. I mean, what a lovely tee up. I mean, that's provocative and then some, so thank you.
So, listeners, I've had the pleasure of interviewing Perry on my pods about all things more focused on HR and other podcasts over the years, and it's a pleasure and an honor to get 30 minutes with him today to record something for this audience. Let's jump straight in, Perry. Firstly, when we're thinking about from L&D function to learning system, you've described learning not as something organizations deliver, but something they cultivate. What does that shift look like in practice for L&D leaders who are still operating in program-driven environments?
I think my sense of it is that learning is as much about momentum as it is about things like intellect and skill. So an L&D delivery function tends to already be rooted in the past, best practice, previous models and theories. And it isn't about experimentation and that emergence that you talked about and that momentum that I just said. So it feels like you're just topping yourself up with rather than lifting yourself almost like additional energy or power. So I think that's the sort of discernible, almost philosophical difference. So instead of trying to box it up, set it free. And I think that's the sort of philosophy. We all learn, Bill, whether we go on a course, we get coached or what. We're learning all the time. And I think it's how do you capture that? We talk about a learning culture, but we don't really know how to do it because we can't box it up. And I think it's that almost like shift in mindset that I'd like to see us recognize more. And the cultivate point is exactly right, that we signpost, we almost like test hypotheses, and we almost unravel what learning is for people to find their own way through it, and then we capture the outcomes of it. The biggest outcome I can say that's the difference between a learning function and a learning system is the proliferation of wisdom.
I think we should just stop there. That's beautiful. What more do we need to say? No, we'll continue through. Let's talk about the learning mosaic versus traditional L&D. In your work on learning mosaics, you position this not as a better L&D model, but as a structural reframe of learning itself. How should L&D professionals start thinking differently if learning becomes a living, evolving system rather than more of a curriculum?
So I took inspiration from a former business leader who turned his attention to education, Ricardo Semler from Brazil. So he built a self-managed engineering company from his father's sort of heritage and turned it into a self-directed organization that made more money and did more good for the engineering world. So he wanted to apply thinking like that to education. And I think if you look at education, it is very much an industrial model. It's literally rows of desks with lines of curriculum that we consume and almost like stuff in our heads. And he said, I'm going to turn that on its head. I'm going to create a pathway that individual children can follow almost out of curiosity, so that the mosaic pattern is created by them, not by some curriculum builder. So in his model, he would have like a 9-year-old interested in, art, along with a 15-year-old interested in art, and a 19-year-old interested in art, and they would all coexist in the same space at the same time, teaching each other and learning about art in a way that isn't just, again, boxed up. So I just got totally inspired by that, thinking, well, that's what we could do in the world of work. Instead of creating learning programs, create a mosaic of all the elements that people pick and choose their pathway according to their role, their desire, their maturity, their interests, And I think there's something in people saying that's a chaotic way to do it. And I'm saying, no, that's a natural human explorational way to do it, because they won't do that wastefully, because they'll want it to line up to something like impact and value and future prospects and so on. So why should we like corral people into jobs and traditional learning pathways when it's kind of there for them to plot themselves? And so that's what I'd recommend L&D professionals do. Download all of the capabilities that you've got in your organization. Let people's curiosity almost drive them to where they want to learn and where they want to take themselves. I think you'll have a lot more activated learners that way.
Okay, so this ties in very nicely with your concept of the polymorphic organization, because that's all about adaptability and fluidity, i.e. organizations that can constantly reshape themselves. And can you give us a bit more meat on the bones? Can you tell us a bit more about what does learning look like inside a polymorphic organization then? How does that change the role of L&D? Maybe to start with sort of a definition of what a polymorphic organization is for those who've not heard of it before.
So it is a shape-shifting entity. It's an organization that kind of respects legacy but doesn't hold on to it for any other reason than that it's stabilizing its future. So it kind of moves between future and legacy states as the data, the systems, the markets, the world almost directs it to. So it's not fixed, except where it makes sense. And it is fluid, but not in a dangerous sense. That metaphor, I think, translates quite nicely into what learning is in an organization like this. And the short answer is pretty much everything, because you are combining sensing, creativity, intellect, past experience, future prospects into what learning needs to be. So it often invites people to step away from a job and go, what impact do I want to create? How do I do that? How well equipped am I to do that? What do I need right now in the heat of the moment? What can I almost like diverge from that to learn something to then come back in and solve a problem, but in a lot quicker cycles than we currently deliver learning, Bill, which is often I sign up to a course and then 3 months later I go on it. I've probably learned all I need to know by then. It's just not timely enough. So this in the flow of work that Josh Burson talks about, it's almost like that on hyperdrive, because it's in the flow of possibilities and in the flow of desires and in the flow of anticipated need. That's the difference I'm advocating there. Warp drive.
And there's a strong theme in your work that leaders shouldn't just enable learning, that they should actively participate in it, Perry. How should L&D leaders then rethink leadership development to support this idea of leaders as co-learners within a system?
So in the polymorphic organization concept, I talk about leaders having two primary energies. One is to incubate, and that's possibilities and big shifts and changes. That in itself is a learning arena, Bill, because it's not like I have the answers. It's like I'm being presented with hypotheses to test and things I need to back with either my own intellectual sort of capital or even creativity sort of capital. And then the other one is activating things so that things happen, right? You can't just sit and think and stare at problems. You've got to be active in them. Now, the activation side of things, maybe I've done similar things before, but not to go arrogantly into a state of hyper confidence, but to actually be more curious as well as applied. And that's where learning doesn't happen outside of that workflow. It's part of it. There's already some examples of how this works in Agile when you have stand-ups and retrospectives. They aren't just progress checking, they're learning, sharing opportunities. And it's like, that's what it looks like. But I don't see leaders doing it. I see leaders thinking, I've got to have the answer. If I don't know, I'm going to bluff it. Nope. Just open up and say, I don't know, but I'm happy to learn real time, real quick. Who can help me do that? And I think there's something really frank and almost virtuous about a leader saying, I don't have the answer, but I want to learn my way into what it is. And I don't see it enough at all. They seem to be almost like unwilling to admit that. And if they admit that, I think it gives a license to the rest of the organization to go, well, I'm going to do that as well. You know what I mean? I think there's something really sort of calming about the fact that I don't know, but I'll learn my way into knowing.
That all sounds wonderful. However, I bet there are people who are listening to this pod today and they're thinking, I need some sort of structure. I need some ideas as to where to start. Okay. Because this fluidity piece sounds wonderful in practice, but I'm a structured personality or whatever. You know, give me some tangible bits. So my next question for you is, in terms of the learning mosaic idea,
Yeah,
highlighting
yeah,
learning as something that was co-created, where individuals
yeah,
contribute knowledge and learn from each other, great. But what practical steps can L&D
yeah,
pros take to build more community-driven, peer-led
yeah.
learning ecosystems, even if they don't know what the results will be yet?
Right.
How can they put the structures in place together?
Yeah. So what they don't do is a skills audit, because that's out of date as soon as you ask a question. What they don't do is a traditional learning needs analysis, because often people don't know what they don't know. So, so abandon those tools and therefore have a little bit more of a blank canvas, quite literally. And I think you ask two questions of people. What are they most comfortable with about the things they do, the things they know, and then ask them what they're least comfortable with about the things they do and the things they know. That's all you need to do, because from that you'll get a list. From that list, you can then start to think, how can some of this be delivered immediately? How can it be done with adjacency to expertise? How can it even be that we can spar with a bot and get to an outcome in a really quick curve by helping people with superior prompting and so on? And how can we put some of this in perhaps a little experimental space where we bring people together to build things and learn at the same time? So that's the kind of infrastructure I'm talking about. Very responsive, but still outcome driven, emergent and exploratory. And then you can take all the data from that, put it back in the machine, and then help people learn from others, kind of exploits and adventures. It just creates different energy to it, Bill. Instead of saying, I've got to look to a catalogue or bring in a coach, you don't have to do that. You can just create that communal sense of, like, I don't hoard knowledge and skill, I give it away because I get more back. That's the sort of mindset you need to shift to. But some examples of that, like the what are you most and least comfortable with, and then putting that into play with experiments. That's how you get people animated through this. So you experiment rather than program.
Now then, there's a pretty provocative idea in your writing, Mr. Timms, that L&D as a function might actually need to dissolve into organizations. Do you see a future where L&D disappears as a standalone function? And if so, what should today's L&D pros do to remain relevant?
Yeah. I don't think it's a place you go to anymore. You don't go to a place called L&D, because I don't think that exists. You kind of commission people who have that title and have a sort of market stall. So I don't mind the dissolution of that, as long as they become almost like agents, spotting trends, working with people in the flow of work, allied to projects. So it's not like we disappear, but we do disperse potentially, because I don't think having a centre of excellence for it does it any favours. I think it just puts it into more boxes and more uniformity. I think if we go a little bit wild, feral even, I think if we're in workflows, if we're in value chains, if we're in conversations, if we're in project convening, then I think that's where people will not necessarily look at us as an L&D pro. They'll look at us as some kind of sage when it comes to knowing how to know and knowing what skills to apply. And there will be some things we'll want to formally capture, like how do we put all this into some kind of taxonomy? Well, you do that wherever you are. And you just create a central resource of information you can use to show value at that aggregated level. But I think we've got to live where learning happens, which is not in a department.
Okay, there we go. Just finally for today, Barry, what's coming up for you? What events can folks see you at? What initiatives have you got at the moment? How can folks connect with you? Tell us more.
Thank you. Yes, I have got a few events. I'm off to Serbia, Greece. So I've got a few of those coming up. It's just sort of finished the pre-Easter conference season in the UK. So I haven't got that many things happening this side of Easter, but there'll be more later in the year. I'm writing about polymorphic organizations on Substack. So that's pthr.substack.com. And I've just released the polymorphic bot, actually, Bill, which is an AI-enabled information source that you can spar with to ask it about polymorphic organizations, to create your own ideas and test them against polymorphism, and even do what I call a system scan of where could polymorphic help you most. So I'm starting to bring it into the realms of machine augmented learning, if you want. So you can find that on my LinkedIn pages.
And LinkedIn's usually the best place to reach out to you personally. So beyond what you mentioned so far, it's all about LinkedIn.
I'm on it a lot. Yeah.
I think that's how you and I originally connected.
It is. Exactly. And look at us now.
Look at us now. Perry, that just leads me to say, for this particular podcast and this particular episode, you and I were doing it again very soon, I'm sure. But thanks very much for being my guest.
Thanks, Bill. As ever, great probing questions. Hope it's useful for the listeners. Thanks.